So the first one I'm going to show you is just a regular crochet stitch. I made this little sample piece to get started. Oops, I'm holding it upside down. There we go. You'll see I left a couple chain spaces there so I can show you the stitches associated with those. But if you look at the top, you'll see, hopefully, these V shapes for every stitch. So to begin with, I just did a chain and then double crochets for my first row. And then I've done 3 chains here to raise the height of my stitches so that they meet the height of the double crochets I'm going to use. So for a double crochet, you'll wrap your yarn around, and then the V shape here consists of 2 pieces of yarn. So you're going to put your hook underneath that V shape. So again, it just goes under just those 2 pieces of the V shape. Grab your yarn, pull it through, grab your yarn, pull through 2, grab your yarn, pull through 2 to create a double crochet. The second one I'm going to show you is back loop only. So this is one that's used a lot in amigurumi and also in a lot of patterns to give it kind of a ridge appearance. So we'll wrap it around, and instead of going underneath the V, we're going to go down through the middle of the V and out the back. So you've only put 1 piece of yarn on your hook. Grab your yarn, pull it through, pull through 2, pull through 2. So it does tend to pull that up, but when you do a line of those stitches, it will kind of stretch out and the stitch won't be sticking out so much, and it will create this unused front row will create a little ridge. Now the opposite of that is a front loop only. So we're going to, it looks as if we're doing a regular crochet stitch, but instead of going through 2, we're just going to go through the front one from the bottom. There we go. Grab our yarn, pull through 2, pull 2 through 2. And again, it's pulled that stitch up, but once you stretch it out. Now you could alternate to give it kind of a wavy pattern, or you could use one or the other of those stitches, the whole row. All right, the next one is the third loop. So this one's a lot less common, but I used it recently in a scarf I made. So what the third loop refers to, you've got your V, so your back loop, your front loop, but each crochet stitch is made up of 3, not just the 2. So if you turn it, you'll see, and this yarn is so great for illustrating this because your first 2 are in the light purple, and then the third one is actually this teal stitch that's right below it. So you'll see on all the other stitches, it's not necessarily a different color, but you'll see you've got your V and then the third loop underneath. So we'll wrap it. Now this I find is not easy to work into. I tend to use my thumbnail to pull the stitch onto my hook. Pull through 2, pull through 2. And what that does is if you flip it to the other side, it pushes the V forward, so you get something that looks more like a row of knit stitches. All right, the next stitch I'm going to show you is a front post. So if you look at your double crochets, this body part of the stitch is what we're going to call the post. So for a front post, we're actually going to go around the body of the double crochet from the front of your work. So wrap it around. So front to back and then back to front. So you're actually all the way at the other side of that stitch. Grab your yarn and finish the stitch. There we go. So what that does is gives you kind of an extra long stitch in the appearance. The back loop, the back post is going to be the same but opposite. So instead of going front to back, we're going to go back to front. So go behind your work, around the stitch, grab your yarn, pull through, and finish your stitch. There we go. So you could do full rows of one or the other of those stitches, but I never have. I tend to alternate front post, back post, front post, back post to make ridges. It's actually a really great stitch for cuffs on clothing. All right, the next thing I have is a chain space. So you'll see on the previous row, I put a couple chains in between to create a little bit more of a gap between my stitches. So what we're going to do is just stitch into the chain space, so the space created by leaving a chain in between your double crochets. So we're just going to go through the entire thing, finish the stitch. There we go. So that is the basically foundational stitch used in granny squares. So for a granny cluster, you would do 3 double crochets in the chain space. And you would get something like this. That's going to make it hard to get the next stitch in though, so I'm going to just remove those. But that's the chain space. Now, because I'm going to skip over and use this next space, I'm just going to throw an extra chain in here just to add a bit of a spacer. Don't worry about that. The next one I'm going to use is less common, I would say. I have used it in making flower granny squares sometimes, or doing a spike stitch. So if you come across one of those, what we're going to do is, instead of going into the chain space, we're actually going to go into the stitch from the row below. It could even be more than one row below. Again, getting into that stitch is not super easy sometimes. There we go. And what I'm going to do is yank up a little bit so that it's all at the same height. So your stitch is taller than a double crochet stitch would be. And there we go. And what that does is, compared to these stitches over here that have space in between them, that tends to close up the gap a little bit. So spike stitch is a way of making a much tighter knit crochet garment. And then the last one that I have is just using the space between. So this is very similar to using the chain one space. You're just putting the stitch in a place where there isn't a chain. So you're just kind of using the space that exists naturally between stitches. So again, I'm going to just throw in an extra chain there to stretch it out a little bit. And then instead of going here under the V like you usually would, or using the third stitch, we're going to go under all 3 components of that stitch. Doop, doop. Oh, I forgot to wrap it. Wrap it under all 3. There we go. So that, let me just do a double crochet in the next stitch so we can see the difference. there's a bit of a difference. It's not a stitch I use frequently, but it's certainly a possibility. So you can see that this one is really, the stitch is riding on the top row, and this one is a little bit more rooted in the project. It looks like stitching into a chain space, but without as much of a gap created. If you'd like more details of any of these stitches, or you'd like to see what a larger sample of one particular stitch looks like, just leave me a comment and I'd love to do that for you. Thanks, good luck.